And so, welcome to today's meetup, how to save €1 million in 7 days, and the results of survey on queuing familiarity amongst agile practitioners presented by Ali co-founder Rob Healy. Rob is widely known within agile and lean community for his community involvement and expertise. Rob has consulted many organizations on gaining organizational efficiency via improved operations using lean and agile methods. In recent years, you don't see Rob that much involved with Ali, as he decided to dedicate his time to progressing his academic education and completing the doctoral degree.
Folks, thanks a million for everyone for joining this talk. It's lovely to see familiar faces, people that I haven't seen in person probably since before COVID. As Joe said, just before COVID, for professional reasons and personal reasons as well with the young family, I took a step back from Ali, so I don't get to meet people as much as I used to, and I miss standing in front of large crowds and redirecting everyone to the wrong pub in Dublin, which is what I used to do on a monthly basis for a very long time. So it's a wet.
Sorry, Rob, we have to explain that for those who are not familiar with the situation. So in times of in-person meetups, Rob would regularly tell people it was in the wrong pub happening.
Yeah, but by accident, but never mind. So it's a wet, dark November day in Kildare, where I'm based, and probably where I know, Leo, you're in Brazil. But for everyone, thank you for taking an hour out of your evening to come and listen to me. To kind of inspire everyone, I set this kind of ambitious title, and I plan to achieve it by the end of the meetup. Right, how to save €1 million in 7 days. Now, so if I can get to the next slide. Before I get going, there's an awful lot. So this is the result of the last 4.5 years of research. While I led an awful lot of the research, I was by no means on my own through all of this. Some of the people here I know have been a great help just chatting about different things. But the acknowledgements that I absolutely need to say, I need to acknowledge my academic supervision. All of this work is done with UL. That's why I use the UL livery. I'm hoping to use elements of this presentation, my final viva voce, which is probably going to be in February. It's supervised by Professor Brian Fitzgerald of University of Limerick, Professor Kieran Conboy of University of Galway, and Dr. Tapajit Day of Carnegie Mellon University. Brian Fitzgerald and Kieran Conboy, for anyone, and a lot of us, like I've been a practitioner in Agile and Lean for a long time. Even to me, these guys, their names were new, but they are absolutely two of the top academics in the Agile sphere. Is very interesting. They've done really good work, and they're massive crack. The doctorate that I'm finishing is done with UL. It's a professional doctorate, so it's done part-time. It's sponsored by Solus, and with that, it means that you have to have an in-company mentor all the way through. So to help you and to make sure that the work that you're doing is not just purely academic, it has to be quite practical and solve some practical solutions, like saving €1 million in 7 days. So a few people to thank: Edwin from Intiv, Brian Duffner from EY, James Ryan from Work Matters. Thank you to all of those. It's financially supported on top of that by a grant that helps pay some of my student fees. Enough, right? This is what you're almost probably all thinking now, right? Enough talk, tall man. Just show me the bloody money. Well, hold on a second. This whole talk is about queuing theory, right? So it's going to be like a pint of Guinness. Good things come to those that wait. There's going to be two different parts to it. The first part is the theory. I'm going to try and it's necessary. It's really, really important. Some of it is very dry, and I try to keep it light, try to not go too deep. And while we're going to talk about it, I'm going to start at the end and work backwards, try to talk about how I try not to be stupid, I don't always succeed, and I'll explain that. W3BD, just keep an eye out for that. A brief history of Agile, and a very brief, and probably for this crowd, contentious, actually, history of Agile. The results of the survey, for any of those of you that were kind enough to either help in the pilot study or in the actual survey itself, lessons from Essentra, the graph, introducing a stability metric, a new model, and then we get to the second part of the pour and the real practical part, which I'll have a demo, free software for everyone that wants to participate, and stuff like that. Okay, so let's look a little bit at theory. Now, I had a really interesting email conversation during the week. I won't name names, right? This has been recorded and it's on a podcast. But someone was asking me to get deeper down in queuing theory. I am going to warn you, having spent 4 years immersed in this stuff, be careful. Queuing theory is deceptively easy to just get into. And when you get down into the weeds, it is deep, it is immense. In these slides, I've tried to keep it to the really top sliver of topsoil around this, but very quickly it goes down and goes for forever. Like I said, we'll start at the end and we'll work backwards. So, we're all agilists, we believe in this stuff. I built a retro board. I like to do dynamic retros. Anyone who at any stage has any thoughts or want to shout it out, please use the QR code. It will be down in the bottom left-hand corner, I think, every slide after this. And you can put in, for those of you who've used Easy Retro, who I'm assuming is most, all the cards are hidden as until the end, where we'll share them, we'll turn them over, have a look at it. If there's time, all your feedback will be appreciated. I used, instead of 4 L's, which would be my favorite, I used 3 L's. Anything you liked, anything you learned, and anything you felt that it lacked. We'll start that from the get-go. The QR code is there all the way through. And again, to get myself into trouble, I know I'm talking about a very theoretical side of things. I know I'm in contentious territory. Some people just don't believe the queuing theory has any place in Agile at all. So I'm going to present my findings at the beginning, and then you can think about it, and I'm going to try and justify these as we go on. So one of my key contentions is that Agile frameworks metrics are built on foundations. Queuing theory is absolutely foundational for Scrum, Kanban, and all the different frameworks and tools, a lot of the metrics. Some of them are inherited from lean manufacturing. I'm going to try and show that too. A lot of us in practitioners, we're not massively well versed in core queuing theory concepts. Some we really do know, some we're not so strong on. It can, like I've said, it can appear to be deceptively easy, and I'm going to explain that, but it gets very, very challenging. Systems are not inherently stable from a queuing perspective. Dan Vacanti, in one of the recent Drunk Agile podcasts, kind of made a really good point around you can have a stable team but an unstable system. I completely agree with him on that point. His stuff is very influential. Um, in that world, and this is where me and Dan maybe, I haven't talked to him about this stuff, but he might have a falling out with me. He uses an awful lot of assumptions. I'll go into more of that afterwards. And an important finding from this research, and I'm going to present this, they don't use Poisson distributions. They don't use this MM1. Don't get scared at this point in time. I will try and cover this and try to be succinct about it. The work itself, we used three new metrics. I'll explain more of them. And we built a model using those. And then we went and we tested it with 2,184 different agile systems, 4 million PBIs, 24 plus years worth of data. So we've done an awful lot of work around that. I've done a lot of work around that. I have a free and open source software solution for anyone here that wants to use it. I'm going to give a demo at the end, and I have a Ready Reckoner tool that you can do what if analysis on how to improve teams. So I don't know if you can see, but over my corner, that's the door to the room, or over my shoulder, that's the door to the room. And on that door, I have this graph that you see on the right-hand side. It's from this guy called Chipola. who wrote a kind of a tongue-in-cheek cheek paper. It talked about the five laws of stupidity. They're there on the left-hand side. If the one that kind of I like to focus on, and that's why that diagram is there, he was probably the first person to talk about stupidity from benefits and loss to yourself and to other people. His point, and you'll see it there, is that you can do really good academic research and still be stupid because it brings no benefit to you. You've worked really, really hard, given up evenings, weekends, and so on and so on, and missed catching up with mates, and equally at the same time, um, not particularly benefited anyone. So I look at this all the time with the hope of let's not this work be stupid. It's a nice little way to just remind myself on how not to do it. Um, Dane, across the board, and it's throughout the agile literature, predictability is actually a really big deal, and getting stuff done on time and on purpose. You know, the iron triangle of project management, time, scope, quality. Uh, that's not right, but anyway, and so there's a guy called Garth Salinger that he talks about software having a winner take all effect. It's called design. Um, I'll come back to it, but it's a winner take all. Demand side increasing returns. That's what I was thinking of. It puts a ferocious pressure to be the first to get mass market penetration. We kind of are seeing a lot of this in the madness that is. I know this is going to be recorded as a podcast, but the madness that is the current US stock market, where all the Big Seven, is the Mega Seven, the Mag Seven, are all trying to get to be the one that has a winner take all effect, and people are going all in, like SoftBank taking all their money out of Nvidia and going all in on another one. OpenAI, I think, was in that yesterday. The Agile Manifesto looked at this and looked at how to get work done. The very first line is we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Right? This is what we're trying to do. We are trying to get work done. Um, the manifesto, and again, I feel like I'm mansplaining here to a degree, but it's important that it's stated that it emphasizes the speed, flexibility, simplicity, quality, and teamwork. And there are elements that we're going to touch on here. There's many frameworks under the Agile umbrella. On the right hand side, it's one of my favorite movies. If anyone, again, if you're bored halfway through at this point in time, go watch Margin Call. It's very entertaining movie. In it, Jeremy Irons, he says there's three ways to make your living: be first, be smarter, or cheat. And he says he doesn't cheat. Neither do I. So here's a highly contentious, but hopefully somewhat accurate brief history of Agile. I have to credit, I think was it Measy that wrote the original version of this, and I've adapted it a little bit from it. So there's obviously even more influences way back further than this. You can go all the way back to Ada Lovelace. You can go back to Babbage's computing machines. Obviously, they fed back, and those are in even the 19th century and beforehand. God help us, you could probably all go back to the original mathematicians in ancient Greece. However, I've drawn a line under Erlang, who brought about the original queuing theory on how to get work done and how to get the right number of people to do the work. What he was worried about, he was looking at early telecommunication systems in the early 20th century. At the time, as you guys probably know, they were staffed by people, almost always young women, and they were connecting up between the phone calls that were coming in onto a switchboard and connecting up to the phone calls that were going out. Erlang looked at a lot of this, and he was trying to look at the arrival rates of the expected phone calls on average with the speed at which the people doing the work could get it done, so that they had the right number of people to get the work done and make the connections. That's the early basis of queuing theory. It got kind of there was a huge amount of maths, an awful lot of academics went into it from his early 20th century work. It got reinvigorated again in the 60s, 70s by the early internet providers or innovators, the DARPANET and ARPANET, which were feeders into the internet. Again, they were looking at quite a similar problem. You can totally see why they went back to queuing theory to solve it. That they were looking at um, uh, routers and how to not overload your router as and switches so that the data that's coming in, the packets that are coming in, are not being dropped. Just like you don't want your phone calls to be not dropped, you looked at it from that side of things. On a more solid basis, I think this will be less contentious. Um, Sutherland is very, very open about the lean manufacturing side of things, and Taiichi Ono. Winston Royce said um, that agile just will not work for in the IT sector, but yet we talk about waterfall all the time. Fred Brooks, I'll talk a little bit more about him and Brooks's famous law. You can see it in Sutherland's book. You can see it across. I think Mary Poppendick talks about Fred Brooks and his famous Brooks's law. The Key Theory of Constraints by Eli Goldratt and the Goal, brilliant book for to bring on a holiday. And then we start to get into the models and the frameworks themselves. I had the great pleasure of meeting Tom Gilb when I was an absolutely daft young man in my 20s over in London, where I met him. He gave a presentation to a group of people in the casino. Obviously, I was more interested in the casino than actually listening to Tom Gilb at the time, and I regret it to this day. Um, Barry Boehm, who's an absolute giant in this side of things, but funnily enough, not talked about and not involved in the original manifesto writing. We've had talks from Alistair Cockburn, I'm not sure how to pronounce his surname actually. I don't think we've ever had Jennifer Stapleton, Joe. I don't know, but from DSTM, we all know the lads from Scrum, and Ali has had talks, several talks from Jeff Sutherland, and at least one from Ken Schwaber. But around that time, and it's very, very important, a lot of the thinking in that early 90s was this lean thinking of inheriting some of the ideas from Japan in lean manufacturing from the Toyota production system. A lot of those guys talk back at this, and you had guys called John Shook and Jeffrey Liker bringing this in. But the actual lean thinking book was by Womack and Jones, and it was in that 1996 time. Philip Crookton, lovely, lovely guy. I got to meet him at a conference in Copenhagen, and he's really interested in this and talks about RUP, feature-driven development. A fascinating one for me, guys. Sorry now, and I won't go on too long with this. I promise to keep it light. Was is a fantastic paper. I'm happy to share it or point to it at least, the link to it, by a guy called Mikio Aoyama. I think he's now a professor, but he wrote about Fujitsu in 1998, and he talked about how they were able to use iterative development based off lean manufacturing principles, and he called it, for the first time in 1998, agile software development. In all of my literature review, and I have nearly 1,000 papers, there are two that refer to this original paper. Almost all of them refer to the 2001 meeting in Snowbird uh, with the manifesto. But the Agile actually had existed for 3 years before that, which I thought, anyways, you guys might all know that, but it was brand new to me and I still think it's fantastic. Now, here's where I get controversial. So, the original manifesto had brought in an awful lot of the authors of those previous methods and discussed it, particularly around the software side of the house. They still inherited later ones, Mary and Tom Poppendick's work in lean software development, David Anderson's in Kanban, and kind of the single team frameworks kind of stopped there a little bit. And again, that's where I might get contentious. We start to go in, and this is where we all might disagree of what is and is not agile. I've heard many people say that safe is not agile. Is Scrumban? Don't know. Is Lean Starter? Don't know. Definitely influenced. DevOps, is it agile? It would definitely see its roots in it. Donald Reinertsen, he wrote the Flow book in 2009. He had earlier books, but his seminal Flow book was 2009. Bas Vode and Clary Glarman in 2014 around less. Then Jake Knapp, his book was in 2016. Agile HR, Pia Maria Thorne, we've had her in Ali as well. Marty Kagan, myself and Dave, we did a interview with him around his new book a couple of years ago, and Team Topologies with that. Now I stopped it there. There's many other. I know Leo. I nearly put in flight levels. I know we talk about that all the time, but this is almost a more important thing. When you start, and I had to sit down and read so much stuff from all these different people and all the different books, you start to see the patterns coming through. You start to see a pattern of the ones that are looking at queuing theory. So it's not going to surprise anyone here that the flow book is full to the gunnels of queuing theory. Mary Poppendick has it in her book in Lean Software Development. However, she looks a lot at the manufacturing, lean manufacturing, and single piece flow side of the house. It's very, very important. That influenced so many of the thinkers. Theory constraints definitely inherits from that. Scrum, Jeff Sutherland has it in his book almost on one of the first pages. He is all over lean manufacturing. He inherited so many of the ideas from it, and so on and so on. So safe design sprint and so on. So when you start to look at it like this, you start to see where the metrics are coming from. In lean manufacturing, they focus on single piece flows. So they're looking at queuing theory. They're looking at things called takt time a lot coming in from operations management. And in that, you're trying to achieve single piece flow where the rate at which the work is coming in is equal to or less than the rate at which the whole factory can do the work. And when you achieve that, that's what Womack and Jones were talking about. The reason they called it single piece flow is they were looking at Michele's sixth sense, Michele's sense of joy and happiness on the teams. A lot of what Jeff Sutherland talks about is that same sense of flow. Try to get your sprints down, that you're focusing on a single piece all the way through. And the smaller you can make it, the better. He makes that very, very clear. So velocity is inherited from that. The happiness metric is coming straight from Csikszentmihalyi's work. Escaped defects because they come back and influence your flow. Womack and Jones talk about the impact of quality and the importance of quality because it damages your flow, and some of the burn downs, release metrics, and so on, like that, the sprint and release. From queuing theory, then, and we'll talk more about Little's Law, but Little's Law is really guiding in this space. Throughput is the rate at which work is getting done. From queuing theory, this is a little bit more broad, and I'm going to talk about it, than just Little's Law itself. We kind of simplify it a bit, or certainly anyone that I've worked with in the Kanban side of things simplifies it and possibly a little bit too much. Cycle time is that in single piece flow, again, it's kind of coming in from that side of things. It's related to the service rate, and in the service rate world, it's when you have a single piece, it's one over the service rate because you got one thing and it's just the total time it's taking you to get anything done. The cumulative flow, straight from queuing theory, mean time to recovery, it's a form of service rate, and the deployment frequency, no other form of service rate. So what I did, I put this at the end, even though an awful lot of the research happened before this, or I've put it, sorry, earlier on, even though the research happened before this. And kind of wanted to know where the knowledge currently is with agile practitioners. So I took, built a survey, sent it out. 162 people completed it, of which 158 were valid responses, and I was able to compare it against. I used some questions that were similar to, almost the exact same as the digital AI 17th State of Agile survey. Their sample size was much, much bigger. I think they had 700 odd people in their sample size. When you compare it around the tools, the roles, and the technology sectors, you can see that there's a very similar pattern. So it means that even though the sample size is only 158, it's still somewhat representative of the broader population that tend to complete surveys, online surveys, where you don't get, you can see that it's your answers are really, really representative. This is the familiarity in usage. I gave just a fistful of kind of core queuing theory concepts, and asked the level of familiarity. The boxes on the left-hand side, I don't know how small it is on your various screens, but it went from extremely familiar, which is 4, to not at all familiar, which is 0. And you can see the distributions there this on this box plot. So WIP limits, most people were very, very familiar with. The average is about 3.5. That the mean is about 3.5. The interquartile range goes between 3 and 4, with some outliers down to 2, which drags it down a bit. On the exact WIP limits you'd fully expect, that's a very common Kanban theory. Lead time, cycle time, used all the time, particularly in Kanban. DevOps, there's lead time is one of the 4 metrics from Forsgren. Flow, not necessarily the best description, because again, it can refer to the psychological flow, or it can refer to Don Reinhardson's getting work to flow. So my noted self-criticism of my survey. Um, then into Kendall notation and ergodicity. These are fairly important concepts in queuing theory, and almost no one was familiar with them at all. You can see there was a couple of outliers that pulled the mean up, but it was still less than 0.5 across the board. Then the usage of it, I just in theory, and I give them short titles that they fish the board, not label at all. So status is updating the status of the business on a daily basis. It would be unusual not to do it at that kind of frequency. On the counterpoint of that, the utilization and measuring the utilization of the arrival rate. There were some people that do it, definitely. And so people were looking at it once a month or so. There was an interquartile range there that looked at it. However, the averages, when you look at them, were way, way lower. Some people, an awful lot of people said, I don't know what this is, and I don't do it a lot at all. So, no, go to the next page. And what I did then was I looked at and I created a correlation table. So, and these are ordered by the frequency that you saw on the last 2 charts. So down this bottom side, it means that these are not very familiar and hardly used at all. And you can see that they're green. None of these are above 5. So a correlation of 1 means that the 2 things correlate exactly. Correlation of 0 means it's not correlated at all. Down the bottom is the highest. So the highest is 0.4, which isn't a great correlation at all. But it means that some of these people are not particularly familiar and don't particularly use these techniques at all. Up in the top, things that people are familiar with, there's still limited to no correlation. So even if you're familiar with some WIP limits, lead time, cycle time, you may not be practicing some of these ideas an awful lot. It's really interesting, even though it's foundational, where the degree of which people are familiar and use it is not great, is the only way. So, queuing theory, keep it light, right? So there's some big concepts and all the rest of it. The nicest and simplest way I have of thinking and talking about this is I live in right now about 30 seconds around the block. There's a little centre. And in that centre, there's at times it's dark and late now, so it wouldn't be too busy. But early in the morning at lunchtime, there can be queues and going up to the cash register. When the queue gets above certain number of people, they do what? They ring a little bell, and another person comes on and opens up the till and the cash register, and the queue starts to go faster. They keep a very, very close eye on this, because, and all shops are on top of this. This isn't just unique to Centra. A friend of mine used to work for Lidl, and it was a few years ago, but I believe Lidl have a policy that you have to get 30 items across the checkout every minute or something like that, it would certainly explain why the one in Kildare, you always feel like they're chucking stuff at you, at speed. But they keep a very, very close eye on this service rate because they know when people stand in the queue and get bored, either they walk away and don't pay, and that's almost the least thing, because worse than that, people tend to stick stuff in their pockets, the children open up the chocolates that are in front of them, bad things start to happen. From our perspective, there's a couple of things to really notice here. First of all, we spend an awful lot of time estimating. Now, I don't want to go down the Vasco Duarte argument that was had almost a decade ago, I suppose now, of no estimates and all that kind of good stuff. But within any given queue, there's always an expectation of variation. Some people will stand in the center queue and they're only there to get a liter of milk and they have exact change in their hand. Other people will stand in the same queue and they'll have 1,000 items and want to chat and only pay in cents and have the deposit return scheme vouchers and so on. And they're going to take an awful lot of time. So, and equally, it's not consistent through the day. So right now at nearly at 6:30, there's not too many people in there. Chances are 9 o'clock lunchtime, it'll be packed. And so they go up and down in peaks and troughs. The last thing to notice, and this is again is very important for us, and particularly around a lot of the conversations around AI, the server is not a person. The server is a full socio-technical system. The person cannot just stand there. They obviously need the cash register, and the cash register, well, now there's those automated ones, but they're awful. But the cash register, by and large, needs a person to operate it, right? When you break it down, it comes into this really, really simple model. This from a lady. Anyone who does is a glutton for punishment. There's a book that you can try from a fantastic professor called Moore Harchol Bolter, who's brilliant and really walks through really simple ideas about queuing theory. This is the diagram that she would use, and this is your center. The big round circle there, that represents the server. The boxes before it, they're the number of the people in the queue. The mu, the Greek letter, and again, we're getting into mathematical territory. I'm going to keep it light, but the mu is just the rate at which work gets done. People get their groceries and get out of the shop over a given period of time. It could be a day, a week, a month, an hour, whatever. As long as you're keeping, and again, Jan Vacanti hammers this point home all the time, consistent units, you need to know the arrival rate in the queue on the front page of all these queuing theory books, like it's page 2, page 3, 7 at the latest, all queuing theory assumes that you're looking at, well, elemental queuing theory assumes that you're looking at stable systems. That means that your service rate is higher than your arrival. Your average service rate is higher than your average arrival rate. If that doesn't happen in the real world, in Centra, if their average service rate was not higher than the average arrival rate, the queue would start to grow and grow and grow and would never actually stop. That's why they ring the bell to increase the service rate and to get more people flowing through. It's something that we'll look at far more. Now, I created these nice diagrams, but the numbers behind them are preposterous. It would be an incredibly quiet shop. It would have only had 5 customers per hour and only a service rate of 6 customers per hour. But that's what a Poisson distribution looks like. It just means that the average sits in the middle of those two graphs, but the graph, it's absolutely fine, and you fully expect it that some of the time, based on those probabilities, some of those times you'll have 13 people showing up in a given hour and only one person being able to be served. It is the variation that creates the queue. If it only worked on an exact average all the time, you're in a deterministic system and it's completely different. When you get Poisson arrivals and Poisson distributions, within queuing theory, they use the letter M, which stands for Markovian, or because of Markov chains. I won't go into any details around this. Anyone who's interested in that side of things, Veritasium, I don't know if anyone watches the Veritasium YouTube channel. Derek there has an amazing, really interesting history of Markov chains, and is going to be far more interesting than me. Within queuing theory, they have a thing called the pass to property, which stands for Poisson arrivals C time averages. Means that once you have the Poisson arrivals, all is good. You can just look at the averages. Happy days. That means you can do this. You can just, you don't, while there'll be variations at any given stage, sometimes you'll be heavily loaded, sometimes you'll be lightly loaded. Over time, things will behave on an average basis like this. Means if you start and how you can have, because it took me quite a long time to wrap my head around this. How can you have a service rate higher than your arrival rate? How can you do work that doesn't exist? And the reason being is there's a delay between the two, so that and again, there can be the variations that load at any given stage, but by and large, and we'll know this in Agile, Jeff Sutherland talks about you needing to have 2 sprints worth of work before you start and kick off an original team. You load the system first, and then you burn down from it. So there's a delay, and that's what allows you to burn down from there. Now, I'll skim across this. This is very important, but I won't waste too much time because I'm running out of it. We talked about the Markovian. So the MM1 stands for Markovian arrivals, Markovian service rates, and one means one server. When you ring the bell, you create 2 servers, and the 2 servers flow and it joins up again. K is the number of places in the queue. N is the population from the queue. Things come. In our agile world, the population is always infinite. The last one is very important. We don't worry about this, and I'll explain why in the next slide. The discipline of the queue in a lot of real world queues. So one queue that's very common is your email inbox or Twitter or all of social media. Gambling uses last come, first serve all the time. It's addictive. You're always expecting what's the last in, what's the last in, what's the last in. In uh, practical queues, so for queues for shops, queues for items on shelves and whatnot, they use first come, first serve. In Agile, we use neither, and we make a big deal out of this. And it's one of the things that gives us our agility. We dynamically reprioritize all of our systems. That has a big impact, and I'll talk about that later on. But we use this Little's Law. Anyone who's familiar with Dan Vicanti, you can almost and his book and the podcast, you're going to be familiar with this. He's all over Little's Law all the time. He talks about the assumptions are absolutely paramount, but Little's Law is quite a limiting. They use it in queuing theory an awful lot for stable, long-lived systems that are aperiodic and non-recurrent, which gives you a thing called ergodicity. Really technical. Basically, it means that you have to be burning with basically no queue. In that world, your arrival rate, when you have in effect over time, over a long, long period of time, you're working with almost no queue. Your throughput will be your arrival rate. And that's why when every time you've seen this is always this lambda term. Anytime you've ever seen it, you might see this as L, W is used a lot of the time, the slight different ways that it's expressed, but it's almost a warning that how to simplify, and it only exists in a very lightweight way of doing it. As long as you have mu greater than lambda, your average service rate is higher than your average arrival rate, you're able to create what are called equilibrium equations. I won't go into, well, I need to go into a couple of them. The utilization factor, I'll talk about that in a second, but you have the total time is the service time, can be the cycle time, plus the waiting time. What you'll see a lot in Kanban world is they only look at the whip time, the time that things are actually in progress. There's a danger in that you are using queuing theory and ignoring the queue. I would just caution, caution, caution against it. The last one is the waiting time, and a lot of these in queuing theory, and again, it gets very heavy very quickly. They use this utilization factor. It is paramount, and again, they always assume in queuing theory that it's less than one. Quickly, I'll skip over it, but this is just how to bring it back to the world that we understand a bit better. So if you take your standard, very, very lightweight Kanban boards, backlog in progress and done, this is your queue coming into a team. There's the 3 items in progress shared across all these different things. And the done is not actually part of the system, the queuing system itself, but it gives you an idea of the service rate. In Scrum, product backlog, obviously dynamically prioritize queue, sprint backlog taken from it in an attempt to achieve close to a single piece flow that you're working through this, and it creates a potentially shippable increment. You have to do a little bit of maths to make sure that the potentially shippable increment, you're just counting all the way through consistently the same number of PBIs all the way through. Here are some equations that express velocity in terms of average story points times the duration of the sprint times the utilization factor times the service rate. So you can make the connection between velocity and service rate. And service rate, again, is 1 over the cycle time in a single piece flow system. Less has a very, very good page around queuing theory, and they look at how you scale it. Fundamentally, it's the same as the ringing the bell and getting more people into the systems. And here's the graph. If you've read the Phoenix Project, if you've read Lean Software Development, if you've read it in Product Development Flow, there's a paper called a guy called Peffer. You'll have seen this graph. It appears loads and loads. That's only the academic references, Medium articles, and it always shows the same thing, that it's utilization versus waiting time. It comes from that equation around the equilibrium. It has a real problem, several actually real problems. One of them is identified by Forsgren in the DevOps. They looked at using utilization as one of the 4 key DevOps metrics and rejected it because they said it can be misused as a measure of productivity. They didn't like it. It is unfortunately all the time confounded with capacity. So it's system utilization, not the individual team utilization. And most toxically, it kind of makes it look, that graph, as if your system only can exist in the stable zone between 0 and 1. In reality, most systems, left, right, and center, are inherently unstable, but for mathematical reasons, they do this, and as well as that for practical reasons, that again, you can't have a queue going out the door. So this is what we did. It's really simple. We just converted it, and we created a new stability metric where you look at the service rate over the arrivals rate, and the graph moves in this new direction. The huge benefit for this one, and again, Forrest Grid didn't like it, that the higher you go on that other exponential curve, the worse it got. So you're stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea. You can't have a utilization of 0 and you can't have a utilization of 1. In this one, it's actually a better reflection. You must get over 1, which is your instability threshold, and after that, things get much, much better. A really good video from a guy called Leonard Klein, who's there all around the DARPAnet side of things. Brilliant guy, very funny. And at 2, it's the whole condition. It's basically single piece flow. So we went and we got it from 2001, and we started the cumulative flow for the arrivals, the cumulative flow for the service rates, and went to see whether they went like this, which is what would be in a stable system, like that if they were not changing over time, or like that, which is an unstable system. Really, really simple. Our expectation, if agile systems are inherently stable and Little's law always applied across the board, is to be looking at 80% plus, like kind of that's a finger in the air, but still it was a starting point. Solutions, all of them, the interquartile range, the mean, the median, all below 1. Across the board, all these systems are inherently unstable. That means that for apart from some outliers that you can see that cross across one, little law is not valid. And if you start from the position that it is, you're making a mistake. Equilibrium solutions, like the graph, probably do not apply. It's contentious, but it's true. I wrote a LinkedIn article a couple of weeks ago. Lead time is not a good idea. I'll show you a graph in a few minutes on why that's true. Oh, we can discuss this in the Q&A. It might be because we've been limiting ourselves. We have followed Brooke Law, an awful lot of us, and I've heard it's been quoted to me, possibly by me at times, that adding people to a late project only serves to make it later. But two sentences down after that, he says that's only limited to the number of independent subsystems. It means that we should be able to do what less effectively encourages us to do, and grow parallel teams and potentially grow within the teams. Now, really, really importantly, and again, I'm running out of time, the arrival and service rates distributions, we looked at these for 2,000 odd systems, 2,184, and they should follow that Poisson distribution that I showed you before if we were to assume that you get that pastor property or anything else, and they're not. So these numbers up here, I won't go into it, but it's the chi-squared test, and we tested them all, and they don't. And so the equilibrium models should not be used. So we went to see how bad is it. Well, and this one I didn't invent. This one comes from operations, that we looked at the total number of outstanding items within a system. So it can be the backlog plus the board, divided by the average service rate, and plotted it in this 2 by 2 matrix like this. We drew a line at 30 days. So if anything above 30 days kind of means that you've more than a month's worth of work. If you got no new work at all, and above one, or less than one, means that your system is unstable. That's what they look like. So the worst one has 430,904 days. That's about 1.2 millennia worth of work. If that team stopped today, it would take them that long to complete all the work that they were doing. We talk about, and it's a kind of a core principle, that we should have sustainable development. When you have so much work that is going to take you up to a millennia, and that's, of course, that's a major outlier, but you can see that there's plenty there over 1,000 days, which is 3 years. And that's assuming that no new one arrives evermore, no new PBIs arrive evermore. That hardly looks sustainable. So we wanted to drill down further and get, well, how can we start to solve it? So we decomposed the arrival rate into the planned work versus the unplanned work. There's some really good research from a guy called Amaro saying that about 25% unplanned to planned is a good idea. Equally, Sutherland says that 80% of your backlog is probably not needed. And so we looked at that. And so we built two non-dimensional metrics, the quality metric to look at how much unplanned work, and then the control metric. This is the graph on the left from the exact same system. The graph on the right is from the exact from that system, but breaking down the green line into the purple, the pink, and the yellow. You can see for that system and other systems like it, that system, the red line is higher than the purple and pink lines. It means it can handle either the planned or unplanned rate. But when you add them together, minus the cancellation rate, it can't manage it. And so we need to be cancelling it. When we look to the quality metric across the different data sets, now the different data sets come from different, so one of them, the one on the right, comes from only stories, so obviously that's going to have 100% pretty much. But the other ones, you're seeing a very high percentage of defects. There could be a bias there. Some projects only use Jira as a defect tracker. So I will throw out that word of caution. When we looked at the amount of work that's cancelled versus done, then you get to see that instead of 80%, which is what Sutherland says probably is unneeded, that instead you're seeing very high rates of just letting things through. Only 23% of all the different PBIs of all completed PBIs are ever done. The principle, and I put this in my post yesterday, and thank you anyone who joined as a result, the concept that simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is as essential. It's just not observed. We're not seeing it. Now, 1 million euro, 4 minutes. Okay, we gotta go. So we can, with this, you can see there's huge opportunity to improve systems. Where did I get my €1 million from? Leo knows this technique. We have used it in other clients previously. What we do is you take your standard team, you go to the Morgan McKinley website or whatever site is relevant to you, and you look at the average salaries for your areas to break it down. I took the PM salary, designer, two full front-end engineers, back-end engineers, Scrum Master slash project manager. I know that's contentious. A couple of engineering managers. That's probably too many for a small team like this, and some ancillary costs. A 1 million run time for a agile team is not. It's probably ballpark. You can use it for whatever is your actual running cost of your team per annum. What you're looking to do then is identify through the huge amount of waste that we've identified with this in your existing systems, how to nuke the 1 year worth of work. 7 day system is a simple Kaizen event. Day one is build a project charter with what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Day two is you're going to measure it. I probably won't have time to look at the WorkYak script. I'll try at the very end and extract the data from Jira. I can show you how to do that and use the script just to pull out the metrics. Day 3 to 5, sit with the product owner is the best one. With the stakeholders, actually let the product owner do an awful lot of this work and do what Henrik Nyberg calls Yagni. You ain't gonna need it. You can use a pick chart if you want, whatever works for you. Again, you're looking for the number of PPIs that would be equivalent to 1 year's worth of work to nuke, to get rid of. From that, you can then use a Ready Reckoner, which uses this model to look at the planned arrival rates and unplanned arrival rates, the cancellation rates, and the current backlog to move these arrows and look at where you are now. If you're like this, how to make them go like this. It might require some investment. And then from that, a triage process. On the right-hand side is a case study of a team that brought in a triage process for themselves. They were able to improve their work by reducing 17% of all the different new tickets came in. It improved morale, it improved efficiency, and improved productivity. I probably won't have a time to take for a demo, but I can show anyone who's interested. If anyone is based in Ireland, there's Lean Start grants that your company can probably avail of. That 80% funded by the government for 7 days, that 7 day event, and make the savings. That's it from me. That's the recap. And I'm happy for any questions. Sorry, Joe and Anto, I thought I'd be finished a little bit earlier. Sorry.
It's okay, don't worry.
No.
Okay, so any questions? You can either unmute the microphone and ask them or type them in the chat. I can read them.
So while people
I
are
have
thinking about what.
I have a question for
Hey,
Rob.
Dermot, how's it going? How are you
Not
doing?
too bad. I can't say I followed all the math, right? But is one of the interesting things about Little's Law not that it's applicable in a truly mathematical sense, but that it defines a set of characteristics that we try to, the assumptions that underpin Little's Law define a set of characteristics that we try to instill in the teams who are delivering software. Like, don't start things that you're not going to be able to stop. Like, it has a value over and above its actual predictability.
Yes and no. So the in general, not trying to overload people is a really, really good idea. I think though that the danger is that just by putting in the WIP limits by themselves, you can create an artificial bottleneck. If your system is not stable, you've artificially created a bottleneck that the system itself is not able to handle, if that makes sense. So there is some benefits, but at some point the risks outweigh the benefits, would be my contention. It's a great question though.
Yeah.
It's equally, and again, I get myself into trouble here potentially. It's equally the downside of theory of constraints. Theory of constraints is equally built on assumptions of stable systems. Theory of constraints works just fine in a single piece flow, stable system. If the system itself is not stable, the drum buffer rope metaphor falls apart very quickly. And if we're overloading our systems, and again, that I'm in no way I criticizing a lot of these really good people who are trying their best. Like, so David Anderson's first ever Kanban system in his book, chapter 4 of his book, were absolutely stable. He stabilized those teams. He was using theory constraints to go in and analyze them. But in all of his subsequent writings, he doesn't identify this. And I think it was the cart come before the horse. Do you know what I mean?
All right.
So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so there's no harm in starting with that. Like, start somewhere, start with Scrum, start with Kanban. These analytical methods will only work when there's sufficient data. You need at least 100 days, 30 PBIs minimum. But yeah, once you start to have that, you should see whether stuff is accumulating hugely on backlogs and boards that isn't, and if the team, while doing very good work, are still not able to get all the work done in any kind of reasonable perspective. I worked with a team 2 years ago in Dublin that when we did some back of the envelope calculations, they realized every PI, because they were in SAFe, they were getting as much work during the PI, actually twice as much work during each PI than they were able to get done. But it's a great question. So there we go. This is the little script that I ran here. That's WorkYak. It's really simple. You can extract it. Hold on, I'll try and show. Firehead, sorry, with any questions, but I'm just filling the space because I meant to get to this. That's my email inbox. Sorry. So this is a very simple. This is the MariaDB system. All you have to do is, if you set it up, you can export from here the CSS current fields. You only need a few of them. I don't ever take, and I wouldn't suggest any PII, so any personal names, anything else. You can export it like that. Once you have that, and you might need to do a little bit of cleanup, it comes in as a Excel file that looks like this. Oh, sorry, folks. Is there any questions? Sorry, while I'm dragging this up. Really simple Excel file that just has the created date, the resolve date, the resolution, the status, and then there's just these 4 scripts that run through it. Like you saw there, it takes all of a minute to get through 3,000 odd data points, and you get to see graphs like this, which is the lead time graph for the system, which again, this would be fairly typical. Vacanti actually warns about this in his book, about lead time graphs that go like that. It's one of the real dangers of using lead time as a metric, that because it's lagging, it only shows you when stuff is done. And so you can get all these red dots done down here, and I think in the limit, you can have a falling lead time while the backlog, the system is unstable and your backlog is growing, and you're getting a completely false metric. We are over time, folks. Is there any other questions? Otherwise, myself and Joe are going to, and Anto are going to stay on and go through that retro board. Everyone is welcome to join us.
Rob, could I come in and wonder, I suppose, like, what does the impact of delays have? Like, so if you imagine an item hitting in the backlog and just getting delayed could be because of, different authorities that you've got to get through. Could there be stage gates, or it could be architectural reviews, or God knows what else. We've all met them in our time. So how, is that inherently make the system unstable, is what you're trying to say there at the start, or is that factored in as something else?
So if it's happening systematically, so if you have to have everything going through an architectural review, it's slowing down your service rate. If one thing is doing it and you're looking at 100, it's just the outlier. So your average service rate will be just fine. Do you know? So if you have a difficult customer, if there's a tricky story and we've estimated wrong, it's equally, and this is the strength and the weakness of this. It looks at the very large minimum. It needs 30 PBIs to look at it to build out the system. Like it won't even work, the scripts that I have without it. And the reason it needs that is a thing called the law of large numbers. If you have less than 30, you're not getting any kind of averages, any kind of distributions. You might just be seeing an outlier. And you shouldn't make any big decisions based off outliers. Well, you can, but you know, just be careful. This thing is very much built to look at the averages. It's a great question.
Okay. So would you bucket some of these things up then, as because if you had some that did and some that don't, like, so you're kind of creating themes, is it, and then comparing the averages of the themes?
So you absolutely can. So even within this, I can show you. This is just, I look at the lead time. Sorry, Seamus. I look at, that's the, within here, the lead time for all PBIs is 91 days, right? But for the different PBI types, the issue types, the lead time for features 245 days, bugs is 63 days, tasks are 82 days. And that's just the averages. Obviously, there's a distribution within each of those. And then you can, what the script actually does, it looks at it over the last 100 days if it has sufficient data points and can compare. So you can see that the lead time is actually slowing down, which is a real indicator of unstable systems. For new features, and actually we're slowing down getting that, while at the same time bugs are increasing. So that's an indicator that the quality could be falling and that the system itself is unstable. So yes is your answer. It does it at least on a issue type by issue type system, but and starts to look at it.
Thank you.
No problem at all. I know it's like a lot of this stuff is, you know, I find it interesting, but it's probably a bit theoretical, or you know, and other people might find this, the theory wasn't enough. But that's for each their own. Folks, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll just start to go through the cards. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's Sinead. Look, folks. Hopefully.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Well done.
Stop recording there, Anto.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
folks. Thank you. Bye-bye.